Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Mark Ferguson, and as ever, I'm joined by my glamorous co-host Nick Owen. How you doing, Nick?
All good, Mark. All good. Back again for another week.
I know. We're still more important than your baby for an hour once a week.
This is the only time you've got me for. The rest of the time I'm handcuffed.
Yeah. So the more observant of you will notice we've now been joined by a fantasy legend as well. He's the current Fanteam EPL season-long champ. Just happened to win last weekend's NFL Redzone contest as well. And he's come to give us all the winning lineups for this week. It's Josh Wooldridge, also known as Check Josh, and on the Twitter as Check Josh FF. Good evening, Josh. So glad you could join us.
Hey, Mark. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. So it's so good to have somebody coming from a slightly different area. How did you get into NFL DFS?
Oh, so I was really anti getting into NFL. So all my best friends have loved it for years and years and years. And I've always been like, no, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play. But for the last 18 months, I can't stop watching it. I can't stop playing. It's just the most fun form of fantasy, I think. Like in terms of action and like getting points for everything, it's just so much more fun than fantasy like FPL, for example. But I'm not as good at it, unfortunately. So I have to just be like a casual player on NFL, but I'm enjoying it so much, yeah.
A casual player who ran the red zone last week, yeah.
I think the red zone is probably a big part of that as well, Josh, because like you play FPL, like I love FPL, but your points and who returns and stuff like that, you only really know if you're checking on the socials or looking on Flash Score or whatever like that. But I think with red zone, because you can actually physically see it happening in person from 6 till midnight and beyond, I think you just get that it's like live fantasy kind of thing.
Yeah, I love watching Red Zone. Like my girlfriend's like a bit shocked that like I'm suddenly now just addicted to watching it from like 6 till 12 every night on a Sunday. But I think it's an hour earlier this week actually, isn't it? So I think
it is.
A bit earlier. So but yeah, so 5 till 11 or 5 till 12, I'll be locked in on Sunday. So yeah.
It's also because there's so much scoring in NFL. I mean, it's pretty boring just captaining Mo Salah every week, isn't it, and stuff, and doing well. So with the high variance in NFL DFS, did that surprise you when you first started?
Yeah, I think not having a captain reduces that, to be fair, a little bit. So, like, I think it would be absolutely off the charts if you had to have a captain on NFL as well. I think it would be absolutely insane. But yeah, like the fact that a wide receiver can get anything from like 2 to 40 points week on week is just like it's quite a lot to get on board with. But I just love it, and I love the fact that I can just sort of get lucky like I did last week and just hit the absolute top of each player. You know what I mean? But it can happen for anyone, I think, to be honest. So if you have that one week where you just call 2 or 3 things right, you're going to do very well, aren't you? So it's simple, but it is high variance for sure.
I'm talking about last week, Josh. So talk us through your strategy for last week, because we know you've told us about it beforehand, but I think this will be interesting to people watching and listening.
So I rarely ever start my lineup by picking a quarterback, but that's what I did this week on this particular lineup. I had him in, I think I did 4 lineups and I picked Rodgers in 2 out of the 4, I think. He was just so much cheaper on Fanteam than he was on DraftKings. I couldn't believe it. I think he was like QB3 on DraftKings, and I think he was like QB7 or 8 on Fanteam. And I was looking at it and I just thought this is a really good game for the throwing game for the Packers, I think. And whilst Adams was really expensive, he was like wide receiver 1 for sure. He was the most expensive of all of them. I obviously thought if I'm playing Rodgers, I have to play Adams as that pair. I think like that was my mentality anyway. I wanted to play the 2 together. And then again, the biggest discrepancy between Fanteam and DraftKings is on the defenses. Like they've just got completely different algorithms for the pricing. And again, it just so happened that the Packers defense was like really cheap on Fanteam compared to like the 3rd most expensive defense on DraftKings, I think. So that was the sort of rationale for those 3 picks, the Packers triple up, if you want to call it that. And you boys talked about Evans and Godwin last week on your podcast. I remember Gronk and AB Brown. There was only 2 people to throw the ball to, basically. So I thought they were just quite a bit underpriced, considering the pricing didn't take into account, I think, the fact that AB and Gronk were out, obviously. So I just loved those two last week, and they obviously were like in the first 2 quarters, they were absolutely locked in. It was insane. I was watching the game and I just thought they were going to get sort of 4 touchdowns each the way it was going. But yeah, I'm more than happy with their performance anyway.
Yeah, that was a great shout by Nick. We actually had quite a lot of good shouts on the last week's show with Sean. We just didn't put them together in one lineup, I don't think.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Mark, I think every player on this lineup that you can see, every single player has been mentioned by us, other than I don't think we mentioned Harris. I think maybe Harris was the only one. But like seeing this, Josh, after you'd won, what I liked was that you look at things like this and you think, well, actually, 5 or 6 of these players were in my lineup. So your thought process was right. The route that you were going down was right. That you might miss on a couple of players, but like I didn't have Gesicki, but I had Kyle Pitts, who I really liked. I said on the pod last week, Mark, I mentioned Uzoma, who had a really good week. So it's good to see that there was maybe only a player or 2 away, and it could have quite easily been me winning or you winning, Mark. We were on the right lines on that week, but I feel like I've missed my opportunity there because that doesn't come around very often.
What are you on about? We're going to do it again this week.
Yeah.
It's funny. You said the 2 Godwins-Evans things. I tweeted out about Rodgers-Adams. No one was talking about them. And they were coming up against the worst pass defense in the... and actually, you got them... I mean, Rodgers at 9% was pretty good. The other thing, Josh, you were talking about, and I think your lineup shows this, is you don't need to be perfect in NFL DFS by any stretch. You've got an 8-point score there. You've only got 3 from the dream team in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, that Williams pick, as I said to you off air, I thought it was going to cost me the win, to be honest, in the end, because the chasing pack was closing in as the 9 p.m. games were finishing off, and it looked like I was just going to fall short, actually. But then I think all the studs got subbed off. I think they were all blowouts in the end, or like mostly blowouts. So I think all the good players were off the pitch by off the field, by the end of the 4th quarter. So I was a bit lucky that sort of none of the Arizona wide receivers got that final touchdown or whatever in the end. But yeah, I thought Williams had cost me, and I actually liked the matchup for him, but they were just so far behind. They needed to throw the thing, didn't they? So it was just it just wasn't the right game script for him, I don't think. But yeah, Chase, just what a performance he had last week. I mean, he just looks insane, doesn't he? Every thing he does.
Completely. I think that probably leads us on nicely, actually, to some season-long stuff. Nick, shall I just go quickly, because mine's the bad news. We'll go with your good news, shall we, after that?
Yeah, why not?
So we'll start with, let me share my window. There it is. So my pod team, when we last spoke about the season-long stuff, my pod team was in the money, but now it's out the money. It's 312th at the moment. It's only just out the money. Changes I've made since last time, I've always had Cup and Hill in there, and Patterson and Henry have been in there pretty early doors. I was fortunate enough to put Patterson in when he was 10 million before the price changes, which I tweeted out about doing and stuff. We know a lot of people, don't we? They've made a lot of money for their team using their wild card and just putting in all the players they're expecting to rise in price in there. Big changes I made since last time you saw it is I've got Brady in, because I just think he's matchup proof, and he's really under-owned as well. It's really for his quality, I think, completely under-owned. I got in McLaurin. That's kind of a sort of leverage pick, as it were, because he's the only guy really on that team, pass catching wise, and he's capable of big scores. He's capable of little scores, as is Hill. But as I need to catch up a bit to get into the money, I think that's I'm happy to do that. And then this week I've added in Ertz and Chase. Now Chase is an obvious one. We don't need to. Do I need to explain why do you want Chase in your team at the moment? No, there you go. And Zach Ertz, as soon as he moved, I put him in because he was a pretty decent price. I think he might even have been like 10 or something, or 11 at the time, or something like that. I can't remember now. So that's it. So I've actually dropped down. So not very exciting for my team this week, I'm afraid. But there you go.
Well, I think last time I was on my team was around the 700s, really struggling, dropped like an absolute stone. But somehow in the past 3 weeks since we last spoke about my season-long team, I've managed to climb myself up to about 240. I think I'm 244 as a matter of fact. So I am in the cash as it stands. 2 transfers to use this week. The only concern being the defense, which Las Vegas Raiders are on a bye. So outside of that, I mean, the defense is. I'm quite tempted to just. I mean, that's a 9 million defense. I'm quite tempted to just stick at the 9 million defense, to be honest, and for a couple of weeks just get the Bengals D in.
Yeah,
because the Bengals have got the Jets and then the Browns.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm tempted to just stick. The Browns on paper you'd say is a tough one, but I suppose it depends whether whether we've got the quarterback back in Cleveland at that stage, and they've got obviously some injuries themselves. They're not at full strength, and like I said, it's whether Baker's good to go. But that's a big divisional matchup anyway, and the Bengals are flying, absolutely flying. So 9 million, I don't really want to spend any more than that on a defense. Outside of that, I've looked at Swift, Hawkinson, both are limited in practice as of Wednesday. I don't know how they have both got on today because obviously things are behind on the reports. But the only move, I think, other than the defense, the only move that I would be tempted to make this week is Tim Patrick to a Dallas receiver. Dallas coming off a bye. CD Lamb had a monster game before the bye. So I think I would go Patrick to CD Lamb. The risk there is that the ball does get spread around a little bit, and I would be tempted in future weeks to also move Hawkinson to Dalton Schultz again, just to free up a little bit more cash there. And then I can either go massive at receiver if I decide to drop Swift, or if Patterson doesn't keep producing like he currently is, which is fantastic really for his price, even at 13 mil. But he does have a little dip. I've got the funds to go big there. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility in my lineup at the moment, but I'm absolutely over the moon that I've managed to get it up to 244, and I've got it to that point, and I've got some of the big key players in there, likes of Cup, likes of Chase. I moved off Josh Allen onto Kyler Murray when he came off his bye. So, Derrick Henry, I've had him through all of his big point games. I've just brought Patterson in now. Swift has finally come to fruition. I've had Swift for weeks and weeks, Mark. You know that. And Sean was asking for an explanation the first week that he got him in. Why did Nick talk me around to Swift? But Swift has had some quietly good games, and he looked pretty good against the Rams as well last week. Had Goff not missed him on a wide open one, it was a big day for Swift, even bigger than it was. So, but obviously the only thing I've got to be mindful of with Detroit is next week they're on a bye, so that's probably where my transfers will go next week.
Yeah, but I can't believe you're rising up with the table with so many Detroit players and TJ Hawkinson. But there you go.
The thing
love
is
of
that
TJ Hawkinson.
TJ Hawkinson's been a disappointment, but when Swift has been on it, he's last week 28.4, 17.7 the week before, 22.4 the week before that. He's 5% owned. So
we talked about this, didn't we? Week 3.
Yeah.
We talked about week 3 how many points Detroit have been scoring. Generally, is fantastic.
Yeah, and the thing is with him as well is when he wasn't having these kind of weeks, he was carrying that injury, and to an extent he still is. He's limited in practice, so he's still carrying a knock. He's still not 100%. He's still putting up these numbers. 16 million, absolute bargain.
So a couple of points you make, which I think are worth mentioning, is that obviously if you pick Bills and Dallas players now, for example, you'd have to worry about bye weeks.
Yeah,
like with Patterson and stuff, and I think that's really important for your season. I'm gonna start doing my transfers based on the idea of, especially if there's a 50-50, if somebody's had their bye week, they'll come in, I think, on a 50-50 just to get it through and stuff. That's what I'm thinking. But Josh, have you got season-long teams in?
Yeah, I've got 13, I think, actually. They're all different ones, but none of them are doing very well, unfortunately. But I had a good week last week because I think it sort of went hand in hand with my good week on the weekly. I think that the similar picks I bought in did well. So, like you, Nick, I've got Chase, I've got Cup, I've got Henry on like every team, I think. So, like, I'm trying to just get it back slowly with like the highly owned players, just try and punish the people who sort of don't have them. But exactly the same as you said, Mark. Every transfer now, I'm bringing in a player who has a bye in maybe like week 13 or 14, or has already had their bye, like I think it's a good move. And the other team is the Chargers, of course. Like, I mean, Mike Williams has been a great pick in the first like sort of 5 weeks. He's had his bye now, and he's very, very affordable at wide receiver. So that's another one I'd throw into the mix, I think.
Yeah.
And I think Tim Patrick might be dead now. Because I think Jerry Judy's back this week, or he might be coming off IR this week, I think. So
no, he's back this week,
I think he needs to go. Yeah, I think Tim Patrick needs to go now. He hasn't even been lighting it up without Jerry Judy there. So with him back, I think that might be the end of him, I think.
We recommended him, didn't we, a few weeks ago, because we thought he was going to be consistent, and then he's not being that consistent.
Yeah.
I literally brought him into every team, like I think week 2 or 3, whenever the big injury happened to Judy, but he just left all my teams this week now. He's out of all of them now. So time for someone else.
I think it shows, though, that the fact that I've been able to move 400 to 500 spaces in the space of 3 weeks, and we're only in week 8 this week, so we're not even halfway through yet. So anyone who is either in the lower half or just middling around, feeling like your team isn't going anywhere, if you can hit on the right players at the right time, and bye weeks is probably the best time to do it, because you're looking at a smaller player pool, because some of the other bigger players you take, like the Dallas receivers, Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott, you take them out the pool last week. That's where people then have to get a little bit different with the lineups. Yes, there's going to be higher owned players, likes of Derrick Henry and stuff like that, Cooper Kupp, but I think it just shows that if you do hit on the right players at the right time, and if you can get that edge on the ownership as well, you can definitely climb the ranks in season long still. Long way to go.
I think another thing is, because of the Thursday deadline, I think a deceptively number of people miss the deadline, on a Thursday night, like really seriously, because I think a lot of people only think about NFL come the weekend time sort of thing. A lot of my friends who are playing have missed one each, maybe like across the 7-8 weeks. If you miss the deadline, like other people are just gonna like catch up with you, and that's good. If you hit all the deadlines, you're probably gonna make ground on some of these people just automatically, really. So it's a good thing to keep in mind to keep you positive, I think.
It's still, and I think as well as that, great point that you make there, Josh. But I think as well as that, we've seen in recent weeks that people are probably making the transfers early, getting caught out with COVID, and people just getting knocks or late injury reports coming out that someone that went off maybe with a knock. I know you're pointing to yourself, Matt. Was it Williams you brought in?
No, I put Antonio Brown in 2 teams last week.
But do you know what? You could put someone in on a Thursday, and if they're only playing on the Sunday, you run the risk, I suppose, of whether they are going to play or not. There's one transfer I made a few weeks back, and I don't know if it was Williams from the Bears, and later that afternoon, he was out, and it's like, that's a wasted transfer. But there are people that are probably doing that and probably aren't picking up on the bye weeks and putting players in that are on bye weeks, and then being like, that's either a minus then, or you've wasted your transfers and you're going short-handed into a game week. So there's definitely ground to be made up.
Josh, I'm talking about that bye weeks, made me think about it. Is there anything you've taken from your EPL experience to do the season long for the NFL?
Yeah, I think the main thing I do on EPL that I've also done on NFL every week is saving the transfers. I try and have 3 every week at the start of the week, and I try and only use 2 so I can carry the 1 and have the 3 for the next week. Because I just think there's going to be one week coming up where everything comes to a head, and there's sort of 4 flags in my team combined with buys and injuries, and I want to be able to save my wild card so I can just use maybe my 3 transfers to sort of get me out of that hole kind of thing. Added to that, just planning ahead, like we talked about earlier, getting in the players who've already had their buys, getting in the players who have late buys. I mean, for the late buys, I think Pats, Dolphins, and Derrick Henry, the Titans as well, are 3 teams that have got really late buys. So that's why I was all over Gesicki on the season long, for example, because I knew I could just leave him at tight end and not have to touch him. And Derrick Henry, as I've mentioned, and I've got loads of Patriots defense as well, just so I don't have to mess with that slot either. So I guess just planning ahead. It sounds simple, but it's what I've done, and I'm gradually rising up. So hopefully I can get some in the money by the end of the season anyway.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next bit, Nick, are you sorry, did you need something you wanted to say there?
No, I was just going to say exactly what I think you were going to say, Matt. No. I think we'll get the Lawnmower 4.0 up in all its glory. So we do go through this every week, but just a reminder that support for all of 5 Yard Rush podcasts is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for those all-important family jewels. Recently launched their 4th-generation trimmer, which for anyone listening back to the podcast, you will not see, but if you are tuning in live or watching this video back, you will see it on the screen there in all its glory. The 4.0. Stunning piece of equipment. There we go. Lots of great features to this. What we would urge you to do is join over 2 million men worldwide who already trust Manscaped. We do have an exclusive offer for you, 20% off free worldwide shipping for that matter. At the checkout, just enter the code 5yard, and that's at manscaped.com if you're doing your shopping. So manscaped.com, code 5yard at the checkout, and that will give you 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Do not neglect this area. It is an important one.
Nicely done, Nick. So I just wanted to just deal with a couple of comments. Can we get them on the screen? Oh, evening from FPL Finn. Yeah.
Evening FPL Finn.
Yeah, he's a little bit. A very glam Nick from Fanteam Official. There you go.
Is that referring to the outfit, or is that?
I don't know. Look, this one is definitely referring to the outfit.
Pittsburgh Penguins really are typical from Sean.
Yeah, indeed. So let's talk about this week's €8,000 prize pool red zone contest on the NFL. I'm just going to show you how to find it quickly. I'll just share my screen and I'll share to find it. And then what we're going to do is between the three of us, we're going to build a lineup which is going to win this week. That's the plan.
We hope.
There we go. Can you see my screen? Yep, you can. Okay, cool. So I find the best way to find these contests is use the filters on the left. Just click on the football one. And then what you'll see is there's some good contests there, like tonight's contest. There's some showdowns for tonight. There's a Jack Humphrey Invitational. He's so posh. I remember when he was just Jack Humphrey. And here's the red zone contest, and you've got multiple buying levels there. And we'll go into here, and we'll build a team together. So let's start with a quarterback. Now, Josh Allen, back from a bye week, facing the Dolphins. He's the most expensive player on the slate. Nick, I think he probably warrants that, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree, given who he's coming up against this week, but not who I have my eye on. 24.4 is probably a little bit too much for what I want to pay for my quarterback. And given that he's coming up against Miami, coming off a bye, I can see him being fairly highly owned just due to popularity. It's Josh Allen at the end of the day. But his price tag might put a few people off. It certainly puts me off. For that matter, for that reason, I am going to pivot to Joe Burrow, I think, this week.
Oh,
Josh is nodding, so Josh likes Joe Burrow as well, I'm thinking.
He's a friend of the pod, Joe Burrow.
That was
I just can't go away from Joe Burrow. I mean, when I looked at the Jets, I looked at the defense on paper is actually fairly middling against quarterbacks, but then when you look at who they've come up against this season, they had Sam Darnold revenge game week 1. They had the Pats, the Broncos, the Titans, the Falcons, and the Pats again. So they've played the Pats twice. They've played the Broncos. So they've basically played Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold once, and I know Sam Darnold started off fairly well, and they've played Mac Jones twice. They're a middling defense, but I just don't think they've come up against anyone as of yet that is going to give you sort of the quality that you're going to get from Joe Burrow. I mean, in his past 2 weeks, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, nearly 700 passing yards combined. There's and against against the Ravens defense this past week, who we all thought was one of the top defenses in the league at that point. You didn't, Mark. Didn't. I know you made the case for it. But there is that thing that exists as well in this league. Old Mo is on plenty of sides when it comes to Sundays, and I just think momentum in this one, Old Mo, is definitely with the Bengals at the moment. I think they'll keep marching. I think it could be a good score for them. So yeah, I love Joe Burrow at that price.
What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean he's one of the three I had shortlisted. I think he has looked amazing. They've got a great like the receiving 3 or 4 or whatever you want to call it are looking really good together. And as we talked about before, Chase just looks amazing. But Higgins is getting loads of targets as well. So I mean, like it just seems to all be perfect. And I think we can go with Burrow. What do you think, Mark?
Oh, FPL Finn says always target the Jets. He said that, so that's pretty sound advice, isn't it? I do like Burrow. I mean, I'm a big Burrow fan, and I had to make my case last week to Sean about this. But if I wanted to come up with a leverage play here, I would go Carson Wentz. The reason being, I think that game is going to be a big shootout. And I think if it is, lots of people will be going for Tannehill, the Tannehill side. Wentz is capable of a lot of yards, like 400 against the Ravens again. So, he's not, and that was an outlier, but, that's why we play, weekly DFS. You want to aim for outlying weeks, I think. I think a very low-owned Carson Wentz, I think you would stack that game if you're going to play him. You definitely don't play him as a one-off. And I think it gives you some good options. And actually, a stack with Wentz and, say, Pittman and bringing it back with Henry and A.J. Brown is very affordable in the whole scheme of things.
Are we also not talking about Matt Ryan enough, who has put up a 29, a 21, and a 17 in his last 3 games, starting to look like the Matt Ryan that we all know and love?
I can't do it personally.
Yeah, as Mark said, I think the Colts game actually looks like a really good stat game. Like Tannehill was on my list for my 3. Actually, I had Tannehill, Burrow, and the very, very affordable Tua, actually, because he's such like a boom or bust player. I think like he could be a really good DFS 1 week punt as well. But I think I'm happier with Burrow, to be honest, out of the 3.
Yeah, I think we're guessing that now Sam Darnold, that's over. I'm guessing we're saying. 2 is interesting. Against any other team than the Bills, I'd be definitely interested, but that's why his price is so low, because he's against the Bills.
Yeah.
But he's just a little bit like Jalen Hurts. He's just one of those players who gets there fantasy-wise, and you don't kind of necessarily understand why. And
I
he's
think maybe that's one for future weeks, maybe, Mark. Yeah, a punt, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's tricky that I've been looking at ways to stack that game, which might be unusual or slightly different. And I just can't personally get away from playing Josh Allen with his receivers and possibly his defense as well, because Tua definitely gives the defense an opportunity. Let's put it that way. And we are looking for interceptions and stuff there. So, but I think probably what we're going to do for our lineup here is we're going to put in Joe Burrow. I think, don't you agree?
I think that's a consensus fair pick, I would say.
I think so. And also, putting in Joe Burrow allows us to talk about a couple of things later, which I definitely think are worth bringing up.
Oh, yeah.
So let's move to the running back position. Derrick Henry almost seems cheap at 20 million to me this week. I feel like he should probably be more. If Josh Allen is 24, and I think Cooper Kupp is 22, isn't he? Yeah, 22. Then Derrick Henry seems cheap at me at 20 million. So where are you looking at for running back, Josh?
Yeah, I've got Derrick Henry as cheap. I think if Chubb's back, I think it's a really tough one to ignore. I think they're gonna run him into the ground, because I think all the wide receivers are questionable as well. So I think and even Baker's questionable, I think. So literally, it might just be a Nick Chubb. Here's the ball. You're gonna run with it for the whole game, basically. I think Nick Chubb looks really cheap. Maybe one other I'd say is Najee Harris, just coming off a bye. I think he could be a really, really good pick as well. He looked great before his bye. He was getting a lot of fantasy points, and so I guess those are the 3 that have come across as cheap on like my small projections I've done. Yeah. What about you, Nick? What do you think?
I think Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry at the end of the day. I think the only reason maybe he's a little bit cheaper this week is the Colts project as a pretty good defense against the run. Maybe that is why his price has come down a little bit this week. And maybe if they're thinking that the Colts can make a game of it, that it might mean that Tannehill has to throw the ball a little bit more than he has done in previous weeks. I really like the price of Kenneth Gainwell of the Philadelphia Eagles. Sanders looks like he's out. I vaguely remember seeing him off on a cart in the game last week, and if you can't walk off the field on your own, you're probably not going to be on it the week after. He's not practiced this week. Gainwell, the limited opportunities he's had, he's looked fairly effective, fairly efficient. Decent receiving running back as well. He's not had, again, a massive amount of work, but he's had 31 targets, 19 receptions. And I think, given that he's had that on limited work, and that puts him somewhere around 12th or 13th among running backs for receptions and targets. Lions are the second worst defense as well against running backs. Only the Jets are worse, which also makes me think that Mixon could be a good play this week as well. 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. 3 have been rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown. I can see a lot of people will gravitate to Derrick Henry, Swift, maybe even Taylor. Taylor's had some really good fantasy weeks. So if you were just going basic off name who's scoring the points at the moment, then I could see Taylor in some teams as well. So I think Mixon is a nice little stack. And I think Gainwell is a nice cheap option as well, because if you're looking at someone like Gainwell, who's coming in at 12.7, you can really, really target the receivers this week, because there's quite a few of the top receivers personally I'd want to own this week.
Okay. So, Nick, I think this is really aimed at you. Last week, we were Darrell Henderson. He cannot fail. 100%. He's not going to fail. And then he failed from a fantasy point of view. This week, his price has dropped. He's the 5th most expensive running back. He's playing the Houston Texans. Why are we not just locking him in?
It's a good question, Mark, to be fair. Good question. I think just the variance of the Rams offense is the only reason I wouldn't lock him in. The chances are he's going to have a good game against a very poor defense in Houston Texans, and poor against the run as well. It's they're in the bottom third for run defense, so bottom third of teams, that is. So I would say Darrell Henderson is a good play at the price, but the variance of the Rams offense, he could take the majority of snaps out of the backfield. But then you saw Sony Michel start getting introduced into the game last week when Darrell Henderson became a little bit ineffective when we weren't running the ball well. So it's one of them. Play him, you might have a great week, but just bear in mind that there's that risk as well that you might get a game like you had last week out of him. You would think not against the Texans, but you'd have thought not against the Detroit Lions as well.
This is the great thing about DFS. Last week, he was have to play everywhere. Every single pod anywhere in the world doing DFS was like, Darrell Henderson, Darrell Henderson. It's literally, we're talking, 4 or 5 days later, and he's not, and he's playing a worse team. Or no, actually, they're not worse than the Lions, but yeah, almost as bad team. And we're like, maybe we do or don't play him. Beauty of DFS, Josh, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously got a great game this week. Like, it's an incredible game. I'm actually leaning towards. I do my projections where I compare the DraftKings prices to the Fanteam prices. He's much cheaper on DraftKings this week, so I think I'll be all over playing him there. I'll probably play him on almost every lineup, but I think he's a reluctant fade for me on Fanteam this week, actually.
Wow. Well, I do love the Joe Mixon. What about Cordell Patterson? Any love for him? Another sort of mid-priced running back?
The only thing that puts me off Patterson this week is there was a comment I read that they wanted to get Mike Davis more involved. Mike Davis has been quiet for weeks. The only time he's scored has seemingly been when he's been on the goal line and that he's trundled it in. I mean, they're coming up against the Panthers. The Panthers are actually statistically the best team in the league against running backs. So, and I know Cordarrelle Patterson is a bit of a joystick kind of player in that he doesn't have to be in the backfield lining up behind the quarterback to score points. We've seen that, we know that. But the fact that they did mention that they want to get more work for Mike Davis, getting more involved in the offense, and it's not a revenge game as such, but Mike Davis against his old team. I don't know. It's just a fade for me that this week. I suspect the Panthers will bounce back. So yeah, I'm not fond of Patterson or Davis this week, which sounds a little bit it sounds strange because he's in my season long, but he's in there because of the price and because you're keeping him in there for several games or a run of games, whatever it might be. But yeah, it's a no for me this week on both Falcons running backs for that matter.
So Josh, have you got any cheaper running backs you think we should be looking at?
To be honest, I'd missed Gainwell. I hadn't gone that far down, so I'm actually quite impressed with Nick's pick of Gainwell. Having looked into it briefly, the cheapest one I kind of liked was Hubbard. I don't mind Hubbard, but I think there's better plays this week. I think there's much better plays, so I think I'd rather pay up a bit more for the likes of Mixon or Chubb, to be honest, at like the sort of 16-ish level, rather than going all the way down, or go for Nick's choice of Gainwell, I think. And
nobody's got any interest in Elijah Mitchell?
You know my thoughts, Mark. I have no interest in any of the San Francisco running backs ever, despite the fact that they do run the ball well. Another couple of names I'll just throw out there. Boston Scott was quite effective when he had the opportunities last season when Miles Sanders was injured. He's coming in at 7.5. Yeah. So I suppose that is a toss-up as to whether you think Gainwell or Scott will get the more work. But Scott could be a sneaky play at 7.5 because he's again a good receiving running back. The other one is, and he's coming up against a tough defense in the Rams, but with Ingram leaving the Texans, David Johnson comes in there at 7.4, and I hate saying that because David Johnson, whenever I've ever played him, whether it's DFS or in fantasy, he's either got injured or he's had a poor game. So the guy drives me insane, but he's cheap and he should get the majority of work.
Wow. I would also throw in. I almost feel like I need a shower for saying this. Myles Gaskin, just because there's nobody else really in that backfield at the moment, and they're going to be behind, you'd expect, and they'll be passing out of there, and there'll be a lot of pressure on Tua, and he'll be dumping the ball off. But that is a real thin play. That's kind of a sort of mass multi-entry sort of play, I would suggest.
I'd actually completely forgot about David Johnson. I've been bigging him up all afternoon to my best friend, actually. He was like the number one catching running back before Ingram left. Now, yeah. I think he's going to pick up like more of the actual runs than Philip Lindsay will. I think he'll maybe get like a 60-40 share. So like, I can't see how David Johnson isn't a play this week, to be honest. And I know he's not very good, but I think if he can get sort of a 5 reception, 15 carries game, then like that's going to more than pay off 7.4, isn't it? I mean, that's so cheap. I think he's 4.2 on DraftKings, which is like way more expensive than the equivalent 7.4 here. So I like him even more on Fanteam, to be honest.
I love that analysis, Josh. You know, we've got to pick him, but he's not very good. But you've got to pick him.
I think sometimes it is just like that when there's no one else. I think you have to pick guys who just aren't very good, and it's so annoying because you don't want to play that kind of player. But if he's going to get all the usage like in the backfield for them, then I think he's just in play, like squarely in play, I think.
So I think we need to make our picks here. I do. And at the beginning, when we first, until about 2 or 3 minutes ago, I assumed we were picking around the middle here, like Mixon. Well, actually, maybe we won't pick Mixon because we've got Burrow. I'm not sure about that.
I wouldn't play Mixon with Burrow personally. I think I'd play Ryan with Patterson because I think Patterson's so much part of the receiving game. It's ridiculous. But I don't think I'd pair those two in a DFS game. I think you can have both on the season-long game, obviously, but I don't think I'd play Mixon with Burrow on the DFS.
So initially I was thinking we're having 2 here, but now I'm starting to wonder whether we go lower and maybe we do put Gainwell in. Doesn't feel right, but maybe we do.
Well, maybe we go Gamewell, and I know that we'd all sort of consensus agreed that Derrick Henry is cheap this week at 20.6. So maybe we go with Derrick Henry and Gamewell, and to spend
see where we go.
To spend sort of like 33 million on 2 running backs is not bad, really.
No, and that leaves us 82 with 6 plays to go, and obviously there's a tight end defense still. So wide receiver. Sorry.
I find the money stretches really far on these red zone games, is what I was saying. So I think you only need a little bit of value. So maybe we've already got it in Gamewell and a defense and a tight end. You know what I mean? So let's just see how far it goes.
Yeah. So wide receiver, please try and talk me out of just clicking Cooper Kupp straight away. Nick, what do we think? You're our expert on the Rams.
I'm not going to talk you out of that. You know what Cooper Kupp gives you. You've seen. I mean, running out of superlatives now to describe Cooper Kupp's season, but the only thing I would say with Cooper Kupp is there's always going to be that week where he'll still get the work, but maybe not to his price point. He's 22.1. He outprices the next receiver by 3.1 million, which is Diggs, who is coming up against Miami, equally terrible as the Texans. Maybe slightly better for that matter. I'm being a bit unfair there. I think you're going to come up against that week where Matt Stafford prefers throwing the ball to Robert Woods, or Van Jefferson takes a few targets, or Tyler Higbee takes some targets. Spoiler alert, I do like Tyler Higbee this week. So I haven't got Kupp in my thoughts as it stands, and I've no doubt that Kupp will be highly owned as well because of what he's doing at the moment. And it's almost stupidity at this stage not to play him. But if you do play him, are you just going with what the rest of the crowd is doing? You're not sort of standing out. And I think sometimes that's what you've got to do in this kind of format to actually stand a chance of winning. We always say it, Mark, don't we? That you can put a lineup together, but that lineup could have absolutely no chance in hell of winning because it's too easy of a lineup to put together. You've got to think a little bit outside the box. So would I talk someone off Cooper Kupp? No. Do I want to play him at 22.1 million? Also, no.
Wow. Yeah. So one thing I've noticed is when players are chalky on Fanteam, they seem to be very chalky. I think, which actually helps you in some respect if they fail. I think, and you faded them. I think it helps you because there's more of the field you can pass. But other than other sides, I find that players have a lot more condensed ownership, and I think Cooper Kupp will be one of those players. I think it's interesting. You say about the money saving. You talked about Diggs. For me, I'm not really big on Diggs this week. I don't think he's having a wonderful season. I think Sanders is taking away some targets. That game could end up being a Moss and Singletary game as well, or Singletary game, whatever, how you pronounce it. What do you reckon, Josh?
Yeah, Sanders is getting all the red zone targets this season so far, like almost every single one. It's insane. He's not getting many receptions every game, but he's catching 2 touchdowns. He's done it like twice, I think, this season, where he just had like 3 receptions, 2 touchdowns, I think. So I think like Diggs is one that I think really hasn't had a good season at all. Kupp, I mean, I somehow won the game last week without Kupp in my lineup. Now, I don't understand how that was possible, to be honest, because he's just hit these like 30, 40 points seemingly every week for the whole season. I wouldn't talk you off putting Kupp in for sure. Even at this price, I think he might be worth it still, to be honest.
Yeah, if we save some money, if we find some good other players, we may well put him in. As we've got Burrow, though, let's just talk about Chase and Higgins. So last week I got a lot of stick about T. Higgins. And, if you look at things from a result point of view, that's probably pretty valid. As in the result, he didn't actually score that many points. But I think from a process point of view, he's getting better every week. Last year, he was like the Jamar Chase. He was seen as the great hope for the Bengals. He's been injured. He's got better. And he's ended up with 15 targets last week. He was pretty inefficient with them, but he got 15 targets. I think that's going to make Higgins more, and of course the pricing, that's going to make Higgins more popular this week than Jamar Chase. And so I'm tempted to play Chase this week rather than Higgins, if we're not playing both of them. What do you reckon, Josh? I can see you're disagreeing a little bit with me there. I can see.
I think Chase will be more highly owned for sure.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think people just don't look that deeply into it sometimes. it was 15. I know it was 15 receptions last week, but does everyone else know, or do they just remember Chase running 80 yards down the field? You know what I mean, with the spin move. I think he was so good last week. He looked so good. I mentioned to Nick on message, like, they tried to pick him out right at the end when he was in double man coverage, and they still tried to throw it to him in the end zone. Literally, like it was just the two of them and Uzoma, the three of them, just catching the ball for the whole game. It was crazy. I think they're all good picks, to be honest. I would probably favour Chase as well, though.
Yeah, I would favour Chase. Funny enough, when I did a pod in the summer with Jordan Cooper, Blender HD on Twitter, he said he told me that I was giving the field too much credit. And I wonder if I'm doing it here with the T. Higgins, Jamar Chase thing. And actually, like you say,
I think so.
Just look at it simply. Nick, do you think, can we make a case for playing both of them this week?
I'm glad you just said that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Is there any harm in playing Chase at 17.8, playing T. Higgins at 13.4, and having that stack? Because what we know about the Bengals is they throw the ball. Look at Burrow's last 4 weeks. You've got yards of 416, 271, 281, 348. Quite evidently, they throw the football. So I think there's a case to play both, so that you could cover Chase's big gains, his potential touchdowns. But if T. Higgins is also going to get targets and receptions, given that this is PPR scoring as well, you're also covering that side of it. And I think at his price as well, it's not a bad play. He's priced just below Emmanuel Sanders. So that would, I suppose, be the only thing in my mind, is if I was doubling up there, would I still want some exposure to that Buffalo passing offense against Miami? But I see no harm in doubling up on both and doing exactly the same as what we did last week with Evans and Godwin, which we know worked.
It's going to be your signature move. This is Nick soon.
Could well be.
Oh, 2 wide receivers, Nick.
Got to think of a better name than that.
Yeah, I know that was awful.
That's off the cuff and awful.
Sorry, cut. We'll do that bit again. I'm assuming that's going to make our lineup pretty unique as well. I'm guessing.
I don't think many people would think to play two there. I think most will go Chase, and the ones that don't will probably look at Higgins. Obviously, you've got Tyler Boyd there as well, but Tyler Boyd's workload just seems to have dropped off a cliff, which is a shame, because I actually like Tyler Boyd, but I can't really make a case to play him at the moment.
I think he probably needs to move team, to be honest.
He's just got lost in even CJ Uzoma he had a good week last week, and Boyd's actually second in targets. He's only 6 behind Jamar Chase in targets, but there's just no case to play him. 11 and 9 of those came in 2 weeks. So yeah, it's a tough one there. I think Boyd, when he is getting the targets, they seem to be small gain targets.
I think Higgins getting healthy is basically what's accounted for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah.
So I'm on the second page. We need to be on the first page still here. So who else do you like in here, Josh, towards the top?
I was just going to say, before we go on quickly, I think I like the stack with Uzoma as well, actually. So I know that's a later position, but before we lock these in, I think there is a case to be made to just go Chase and Uzoma, I think, because Uzoma is so cheap this week. It's as if they haven't taken into account what happened last week with him at all. They've just kept him the same price, basically. And he obviously had an amazing game last week.
Yeah. I think we may well lock in Chase at the moment and then leave the space when we look at tight end and then work it out. But what about someone like DJ Moore's been very inconsistent, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he started off great, as did the Panthers, and then the last 3 weeks he's been absolutely awful.
I think that's when I started playing him, actually, when he started going awful, to be honest. It might be my fault, to be honest. This is quite a left field one, because he hasn't been good for the last sort of 2-3 weeks, but I quite like Calvin Ridley's price this week. Now, we know how good he is. And in the first sort of 3 weeks, he had really, really solid receiving and receptions and targets. It's obviously dropped off since he had a bit of an injury, and then I think last week he got back up to 6 targets. My only concern with him is how good Pitts has been and how many, and he seems to be trending upwards, Pitts does. So it seems like he might start getting even more receptions. But I think we know how good Calvin Ridley is, and this seems like a very cheap price for him. That's all, because he's normally like wide receiver 4 or something, isn't he, on some of these slates? So
yeah,
I think he's one I'd throw in. As you said, Matt Ryan's looked amazing, like pretty much all season actually. Maybe since week 3 actually, but yeah, I think with Ridley, with Pitts, with Patterson, they've got a really strong sort of offense, I think, now actually.
Has either of you got interest in Deontay Johnson? Because I quite like him for this week, and I think he's going to be low owned as well.
Definitely low owned, yeah.
Yeah, I think if I was playing a Pittsburgh wide receiver, I'd definitely look at Johnson. For me, one glaring name that we haven't mentioned, who was right at the top of my list, is AJ Brown. 17 mil. It looks like Julio Jones is not trending in the right direction. I've just been having a look at the injury report. He didn't practice yesterday. He hasn't practiced again today. And that's not limited. He has not practiced at all. He's been on the sidelines. It's a hamstring injury. Sometimes you don't want to risk those kind of injuries, because if it goes, it's gone for weeks and weeks and weeks. So it might be a week where even if Julio Jones does play, he doesn't factor in as much as AJ Brown. And let's be honest, there isn't much else in Tennessee to throw the ball to. When you actually dissect AJ Brown's stats, he had a pretty slow, poor start to the season for his standard from what we're accustomed to seeing from him. Week 3, he had 2 targets. Since then, he has had 6, 9, and 9 targets, but it's the yardage he's now putting up. So against Buffalo, who were a good defense, put up 91 yards. Against Kansas City, put up 133 and a touchdown. When you look across the team, outside of Julio Jones, who's had 27 targets, you're looking at Chester Rogers with 21, Westbrook Ikini, am I even pronouncing that correctly? 18 targets. And there was that week where there was just no receivers for Tennessee. They had no Brown, they had no Jones. It was Derrick Henry or bust. And yet the targets, and AJ Brown's had 43. That is the gulf. So we know that if the ball's going to get thrown, Tannehill's first read always is going to be AJ Brown. Colts have given up 11 touchdowns to wide receivers. Poor. Tied second worst in the league. So it's a match made in heaven for me, AJ Brown versus the Colts.
Yeah, I do. It's like, as we mentioned earlier, that game I think is going to shoot out. I think it might even be the have the biggest total already anyway. I think I'll just update this. Highest game total already, and it's definitely been getting some money on it. I know that. So yeah, it's up there at 51. So yeah, it is, and it's been bet up like 4 points. So I think that's a great shout. We've got to make some picks though here, boys. I think so. Should we put in Jamar Chase as a definite?
Yeah.
Put in Chase. How much money we've got left now? 64 for 5, and then.
My only thing with Brown is I think it's hard for both him and Henry to have a huge upside game in the same game. Now I know you think the point line's really high, but for Derrick Henry to get there at this price, we probably need 2 touchdowns, right? Like that. So that's going to be like 14 of the points. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard for like both AJ Brown and Derrick Henry to have monster games in the same game. I think would be my only like reservation. I think AJ Brown's a great pick, as I thought Tannehill was a great pick, but I'd just worry about the upside.
So last season, so that was always used to be one of those DFS sort of truths that your running back was negatively correlated to your wide receiver. But last season, Brown and Henry kind of disproved that a little bit with Tannehill. They both had really massive. Not many teams can do it, but what you're seeing now is a lot more people winning big tournaments, stacking, the 3 like that rather than the more traditional way. So, and I just think they're one of them. But I'm not particularly for this lineup. I don't particularly think AJ Brown is the play myself.
I think one of the reasons why you don't see it as much now is there's not as many bell cow running backs across the league, whereas that is not the case in Tennessee. It's Derrick Henry or nothing out of the backfield. So you're not going to run Derrick Henry for 80 plays, 60 to 80 plays a week. He's going to touch the ball 20 plus times. We know that, but then Tannehill's going to throw the ball 20 plus times. And you would say, especially if Julio Jones is on the sideline, you'd say probably a good 30-40% of those are going to go towards AJ Brown.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we need probably somebody cheaper. What about Calvin Ridley? You both seem to like Calvin Ridley, I thought.
Yeah, I like Ridley. I think he's cheap there. When you look earlier in the season, he was top 3, top 4 every week. I'm not opposed to Calvin Ridley there at 16.2.
And also, if we look how much we've got, 5, 4. I wish Fanteam, if anybody was watching from Fanteam, it gave you the remaining per player. That would be fantastic. I'm having to do it in my head. We've got the DST as well to come. I'm just wondering if we could afford something like, we haven't really talked about him, but I think Michael Pittman's a great play if you've got Henry as well.
Yeah.
A great stack play, but I'm not sure if we can actually afford him at the moment. Maybe we can. Should we move to tight end though first? Because obviously what we do there is going to make a difference to what we do here anyway.
Yeah, of course.
So, Nick, are you a Pitts fan this week?
No, he priced me out a little bit there at 14.2. I don't particularly like paying that for a tight end. I think, was he 12 last week or around 12, 12.1, 12.2? But yeah, he's a little bit too much there for me, though he is having he's putting some very good weeks together. He's had 20 plus points his last 2. I'm a Tyler Higbee fan this week, and it'll probably be the downfall of my red zone teams because I've mentioned about the Rams variance in their offense in terms of who the ball goes to or what the strategy is one week to the next. But I still can't ignore the fact that Tyler Higbee is coming up against the Texans. Dig into it a little bit, and you know that the Texans give up the joint most touchdowns to the tight end position. That's a win for me because Tyler Higbee is a good red zone target. He is the 10th tight end in targets, and that's despite the crowded wide receiver core that the Rams have got, which shows how variant the tight end position is anyway. We know that. His recent weeks have been single-figure scores, which might put people off. So if I was coming at this from a low ownership perspective as well, I suspect more people will gravitate to Kyle Pitts, maybe Gesicki, maybe Dallas Goedert. So for me, he's fairly budget there at 10.6 versus what kind of output he could have. But one name that you mentioned, Josh, was CJ Uzoma, and I really like that at 8.2. I liked him last week. I was foolish not to play him. I did get Pitts' points, to be fair, but CJ Uzoma, I think, again, is a good play this week.
Yeah, he's definitely he's a great DFS player. And in fact, look, he got 2 of these big ceiling games there, which is kind of what you want from your cheaper players as well, I think. Anybody else, Josh, you can see to convince us not to pick CJ?
Just Uzoma and Gesicki from me. They were my 2 clear standouts this week, I think. And I even like Higbee now. Nick's talked about him as well. I think that middle price point was
Don't do it to yourself, Josh. Don't do it to yourself.
No, I think I love Gesicki. He gets so many receptions for a tight end, literally. I think he's
not a tight end, that's why.
Yeah, I know he plays. He's like, but when I saw Carl Pitts at wide receiver last week, it reminded me of Gesicki, actually. I was like, what is going on here? But he made that awesome catch, didn't he, Carl Pitts last week?
Yeah.
So,
I
think Uzoma.
I'm not a big fan of that matchup this week. I really struggle to play anybody against the Bills' defense. I really do. But otherwise, Gesicki's he's almost like a lock at the moment. The sort of prices he is as well, I don't think are reflecting his involvement in the passing game. But I think as we've got to speed up a little bit here, should we put CJ in and see where we stand?
Yeah.
So we've got a great stack there. So we've got 25.6. I think we'll probably do our defense now. And Josh, do you play defense the way that me and Nick do, which is literally start from the bottom and work our way up until we find one we can play?
I think it's a good way to play, definitely. So as I've talked about before, the DraftKings and Fanteam prices are most different on defenses. I think the algorithms are just completely different. But So I always play the one that's too cheap on Fanteam compared to DraftKings, and then on DraftKings I play the one that's too cheap on DraftKings. So I always just do it like that, and it's worked out all right so far. Because at the end of the day, you just want to save as much money as possible in this position. So it's a similar thinking to you guys, I think.
Yeah. So who does your algorithm tell you this week?
So the Steelers actually is by far the cheapest one according to the algorithm. But the Dolphins came out really, really cheap on Fanteam as well compared to DraftKings, but I don't want to play the Dolphins, I don't think.
Have you got any objection to that, Nick? To Pittsburgh?
None at all, really. 7.6. The only other, I mean, they've been better in recent weeks, haven't they? The only other one that was in my thought process was, I can't believe I'm saying it actually. The Detroit Lions at 6.5.
I knew that was where you were going.
Yeah, after watching them last week, they've got nothing to lose. This team, nothing to lose other than another game, which at this stage, I don't think they care. It could be anything from the special teams. It could be something. The defense was actually pretty good. They kept us quiet for most of the game.
Yeah.
I watched the whole game and I was really impressed with them. They've got some good bodies there. So I think coming up against the Eagles, I don't think the Eagles are anything special, to be fair. So if I was going budget, that's where I would go. But I do like the Steelers.
I like the Steelers too, because I think Cleveland are going to be one-dimensional for the reasons we already spoke about. So we'll put that, and also we're not playing anybody from Cleveland, so that's great. So now we've got 18 million to spend.
Wow,
18 million.
I like to hear this. This is good.
Nick, look, I'm using the affordable option again and the all option again. I know that was a revelation to you last week, wasn't it?
It certainly was. Yeah,
the affordable options. So yeah, here we go. Deebo Samuel. Any interest in Deebo Samuel?
Ooh.
He scores a lot of points. Yeah,
he does.
He does get a lot of points.
He never seems to be picked.
The thing with Deebo Samuel is, I think Brandon Ayuk being the put a lot of people off, but he's just been a non-factor in the offense this season, Brandon Ayuk. So I don't think Deebo's a bad player, because one thing Deebo does really well is he's always high on his yards after catch as well. In fact, I think he's up there with Cooper Kupp. He may even be above him yards after catch. So I think he's not a bad player. I don't know if he's 18 million of a player, but he's putting up the points every week, isn't he? And they're coming up against the Bears. The Bears have been atrocious.
Yeah,
he's not the sexy player, but I think he's a really solid player, and he'll have such low ownership at this price. I think he'll be virtually 1 or 0% owned genuinely at this price. Yeah. So I think this could be the difference for us.
I think that's the play.
Bears are the 4th worst defense against wide receivers as well, which is I didn't realize it was even that low, but that's
I think the Bears are sort of I think it's the same as the Ravens defense thing, where everybody just assumes they're good because they were good in the past, and it's not the case. And so I think Deebo is gonna. This is our winner. That's what's gonna make us, like you say, Josh. It's gonna make us stick out. I mean, basically, I think in terms of Gainwell and Samuel, we have two, pretty low owned plays. I think so. That's a pretty good lineup. Literally uses all our money, which kind of feels nice. I always think. So
I feel like you've got value for what you're paying then.
Yeah, I mean, and we've got in Henry and Chase. Burrow and stuff. So I'm really pleased that. So just to quickly run through the lineup here, we've got Joe Burrow. We've got him paired with Jamar Chase and CJ Uzomah. That's a nice little stack we've got there. We don't particularly feel the need to run that back with the jet stack. At running back, we've got Gainwell and Derrick Henry. One value pick in Gainwell. We're taking a bit of a punt there, and Henry is an obvious play. Calvin Ridley showing signs of life. Michael Pittman, who is just doing some fantastic things in Indy, and Deebo Samuel as our sort of high-priced, just consistent, but hopefully low-owned play, and a Pittsburgh defense. We don't really mind about defense that much, though, do we?
No.
So yeah,
I noticed you let me pick that one. I was going to say, I was like, I don't care about the defense.
No, I was going to go for Pittsburgh as well. Well, since we didn't pick Chubb, that's who I was going for.
Oh, wicked.
And I think the other side, I think the other thing you maybe talk about this thing with defense is it's not such a hard and fast rule now that you don't play defense against a player in your team either. in tournaments, it's just showing that you can play a defense against yourself. So it's another one of those myths, I think, which has been kind of busted over the last year or so in tournaments. So yeah,
I wouldn't play it against the quarterback, but I think you can play it against any other position. Literally, any other position is fine.
And especially if you're, say, for example, punting at tight end or something like that. I just think it's a great way to be different as well, make your lineup unique. So
against a cheap player, it's not even a factor. I don't think I wouldn't even consider not doing it. But against a really expensive one, I might think twice. But I think the defense, it's a bit of a luck spot, like you say. Sometimes you just need that defensive touchdown, or you need the game where they randomly get 3 interceptions. You know what I mean? It's quite a lot of factors go into it, and not always obvious before picking the lineup. So yeah.
And again, we're talking about defense too much again, Nick here. But one thing that's happened this year is there hasn't been like the last couple of years. There's always been these defenses have been scoring 30 points or something like that each week. Like Patriots did it consistently. That hasn't happened really this year. There hasn't been that one standout defense. So I think, Anyway, no more defense talk. That's an order, everybody.
The D in DFS on this podcast stands for defense. It does not stand for daily.
We won't talk what the F stands for. So that's it. I think we've picked the winning lineup there. So everybody will be playing for second if you don't play that lineup. And So any closing thoughts, Josh? Anything else you want to say before we sign off here?
No, just thank you for having me. I've had a really great time talking about something different like NFL. It's so much fun. And when we were looking through that, we could have picked so many different options. It's just so interesting, like the different combinations you can have in this game. So if you guys think you can beat us, definitely put something different in. Whatever we said that was wrong, just go for it.
We could have talked. I felt we could talk for like 3 hours about this particular slate because there's so many great options and stuff. So Nick, do you have a sign off for this week from Pitsy?
We don't. Pitsy's been ever so quiet the last few weeks. No sign-offs whatsoever. So the only thing for me to say would be you can find me on Twitter at Nick of Wigan. Josh, where can the listeners find yourself if they're not already following?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as CheckJoshFF. Please follow me if you want to hear some stuff about fantasy football and the odd thing about NFL. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's great. Well, thanks a lot for that, guys. If you have any comments or anything, you can hit us up on Twitter, DMs. You can hit us in Discord, I think, all sorts of places and stuff. And that's it. So you haven't got any sign off. Well, good evening, everybody, and good luck. And hopefully we'll do well.
See you next week.
See ya.